reduce the friction. I'm just going to true up the edge of this bit of wood to do a practice cut for a Mortise and Tenon joint. What I'll do now, true up the edge. I'm not being too particular because it's only a practice joint, but I still want one flat side and one flat edge. Full video on types of planes and purposes, and so you've got a lot of different sizes, and you don't want to. I know that's still not quite flat yet, but it'll be good enough for this purpose. So I'll hold it up to the light. Square on it, and you see I'm a little, I don't know whether you can see that or not, there's a little bit on this side to come off. I'll just tilt the plane up a bit, take off a shaving from that side, up a bit, one side, and then have a couple to smooth it all back out again. Have a look. Probably not enough yet, but that's not bad. It's pretty good. I will set a marking gauge or panel gauge if I find one. Just to it's an English pattern gauge. We don't use these anymore. Don't want too much, so I'll probably just go for thickness. For this, we'll just go 2 inches. Okay, so that's near enough 2 inches now, which, as it's a practice piece, that's not particularly important. So now what I'll do, run the gauge down the long grain of the piece, just to give myself a line to follow. More standard these days, it's just a marking gauge with a screw instead of a wedge. Much easier to set up if you're just starting out. If you were taught to use wedge marking gauges, then you'll obviously find these easier. I'll set that to the distance that the other marking gauge was marking at. Then I'll just tighten the screw, and that's set. Flip it over, still on the same square edge, and run a gauge line down that side. And I'll just run a pencil through that line so you can see it a bit easier what I've marked. And I'll just do a bit of the end grain as well. It's still got the wax on it from when it was dried. Right, so rip cutting. I'm just using my sawhorse, carpenter's sawhorse, because I'm used to it, because I was a carpenter for a long time. So it's this height so we can get a knee on it, clamp it down. I've got my rip saw. You can't buy hardened tip rip saws anymore, it's not done. The only difference is in the way the teeth are cut, and I'll explain that in another video. Basic rip saw. I'm just going to start next to my line and then plane down to it. Not that it's too important for this, but so, for this particular project, we're only going to need a couple of little short blanks, because it's only an example joint, so I'll get a crosscut saw and we'll just rip that off. Right, I'm going to use a hardened tip saw for this, because they're all cut for cross cutting. Nobody really does any rip cutting on site anymore, so I'll just start the cut. Don't let it drop on the floor. Right, there we go. Right, so we're down to the line very nearly. We are on the ends. We've just got a bit of a bump in the middle. So I'm going to start about 1 inch in and lift up about 1 inch from the end blade, that is, not the end of the plane. And then that'll create a slight cup. Then I'll take one full shaving off. That should flatten. So it's not too bad. So what we can do now is decide how we're going to do our tenon, and I'll cut the tenon while it's still long. What I'll do first is I'll make the ends square. I'll use a shooting board. So it's just a bench hook where the backstop comes straight to the end. So you can use the square of your bench and the side of this and the side of your plane to get a perfect square. So it'll make more sense once I've done it. I'll just set my plane, put this up against the blade, and okay, so that's pretty good. It's smooth enough, and it's pretty square, so that'll do. Okay, so now we've got a blank, we want to just mark out, establish which was our face and edge. What's our squarest side, basically. So I think that edge and that face. So all I'm going to do for that is just put a little squiggle, an arrow on that edge, and then from that a squiggle. So now I've got that edge. Every time I mark a square line from now on, it will be referenced from either that edge, so the square against that edge, or that face. So all I want to do now is mark a depth. So my depth, I'm going to do a through tenon. So I want that to be, that's nearly 2 inches, that board, very nearly, we're just under. Just under is good. We've got about a 1/16 there. So if I mark 2 inches depth from the end, that'll give us a 1/16 sticking out the other side of our joint that I can plane off flush after. And when you're cutting your joints in future projects, you'll want to be able to allow for that bit of excess to plane off. So I'll set my rule from the end to 2 inches, and I'll put my knife and just stab it. So I've got a little slit there, and I'll put my square on, put the knife back in the slit, slide the square up to it, and a couple of lighter cuts, and then a deep cut, because we're going to be chiselling up to it. Okay, now I've squared off of that edge, so now I'll go and a light cut and a deep cut, and now from this face edge again, back into that knife line, up to the knife, and a deeper cut. And I want to go around, turn it right the way over so that I'm referencing off of this face edge again. Knife in the gap, bring the square up to it, and cut across. And if I was square and I referenced off the same ones, by the time I get to that corner, those two lines will meet up, which you can see that they do. Now is another marking gauge, and this marking gauge has 2 pins, and that's adjustable, so I can move them apart. And that's just for a mortise. So at the moment I want to cut a tenon, which means I've got to cut 2 cheeks off the side. So what I want to be able to do for that is mark 2 lines, and just for ease, I'm not going to use a mortise chisel for this because a lot of people don't have mortise chisels. The only difference is a mortise chisel is a bit thicker, so it's easy to guide it, and you can probably hit it a bit. And I'm just going to set the tip of these 2 points at the width of this chisel, make it a lot easier to mark out. You can just see that those 2 points are the same distance as the width of that chisel. So what I'll do now is put it up against the side of the work, get it roughly in the right place. Then for this particular marking gauge we've got a screwdriver, just nip that. So then I'll make 2 little dots, put the marking gauge on the other face, even though it's not that important, and check it. You can see that they're near enough in exactly the same plane, and then I'll just mark all the way around from my face edge. So starting my line, work my way around, marking some lines across the end grain, and you can see now why it was important to plane that end grain and make it a nice smooth finish, so you can see your lines. Work my way up. So we're probably going to cut that about there, but it's only a display piece. So my mortise is going to be around there. So from my face side again, I'll mark the same, just on the surface there. I'll turn it over, same side, mark the back as it's going right the way through. So this is for my own sake of mind. I've put in a pencil line into these cuts because I'm going blind. So now, yeah, we marked these cross lines quite heavily with a square and a knife. Now I'll take a nice broad chisel and just create a little trough for that saw to ride in. A little V groove there. So that'll make it a much easier edge to reference against with that saw. So the start of that, when you put this joint together, and you'll have another bit of wood butt up against that, it'll be butting up against a knifed joint, perfectly sliced grain, rather than a rough sawn bit of timber. And then to try and stop some breakout, not going to be entirely possible, I'll just do on these edges as well. Not really necessary, but just for this I will. So now I'm going to use a Tenon saw which has been sharpened for a cross cut. I'm just going to saw this shoulder cut right down. So on the other side now. Again, we're in that trough, makes it much easier to start. Sawing nice and square up to that edge. Now we're just down to the line. Perfect. So now we just want, I'm trying to think of how I can do this so you can see it. I don't want to start my split right on that line because I'm not entirely sure which way that grain's going to split. So I'll move out about halfway and take like a test split. And that's pretty straight. That's pretty good. I like that. And that's splitting outwards, which is good because it means I can split right to my line on the end, put it flat down on the bench, and then pair it to fit afterwards. Now I'll just take another split, nice and controlled, as much as possible. Okay, now I'll go right to that line. This is a controversial method. You'll find a lot of woodworkers will cut this down with a saw, which when you're working with very heavily grained hardwoods, that's probably a good idea. But when you're working with relatively simple woods like this that aren't too difficult to work with, then there's no reason not to split it. It's a much quicker process. Line in our mark we made with the gauge. So what I'll do now, I'll just show you another tool in a moment. So just get the worst of it off, and I can show you a tool which is almost specifically designed for this purpose. This is a shoulder plane. The only difference between this and a normal plane is that on a normal plane you've got a bit of a face either side which is going to get in your way, so if I was to put that in there I wouldn't be able to plane right up against that edge. This, the blade
goes
runs
all the way
right
across
from one edge to the other.
Yeah.
So I'll just advance my blade. This is a very old plane, it's not got any adjusters on it. And then that's a nice way to get it very flat. Okay, just do the other side, down to that line. Now you can see we just got a flaky bit left on the edge where the line used to be, which is just what we want. I'm going to leave it a little bit bigger than it should be, and then if I get any wiggle in my chisel as we're cutting down the mortise, I'll be able to rectify it by leaving the tenon slightly larger. Careful as I come out that side. Don't break it out too much. This plane's got a very shallow angle, unlike the angle of a blade in a normal plane, which is much steeper. So this is very, very good. Performs very well on end grain for going across the end grain. I'm just going to decide to make it roughly in the middle, about there. So just knife that in. Don't matter if we go over the lines, because it's going to get covered. Okay, we've got a little line there to there. So I've just stabbed it there. So now I'll take the knife again. So now we've just got to remove that middle section. But before we do that, I want to mark from my face edge to my face edge. I'm just going to put a very small nick there, and across a very small nick there. Then onto my face edge. I'll run my knife along until I meet that nick there, and then make another nick onto the other corner. Just there, into the other corner. And these are very light cuts. They will plane out after when we're doing our smoothing cuts. Okay, so what I've done is I've just plopped a piece of scrap wood underneath, not to chisel into because I'm not going to go straight through in one go, but this is to support my workpiece. I'm not going to be hitting the chisel that hard, but it will stop it riding down in the vise. So, and it will stop my grotty old vice faces scratching the edge of my nice clean work. So for this I'm going to use, because I will be hitting it more, I'm going to use this. It's new, at the recommendation of Richard Maguire, the English woodworker. I bought one of these, which I've never been a big fan of soft mallets, but he says it's good and I trust every word that comes out of his mouth. So what I'll do now, I'm just going to, as if I was chopping in a hinge, I want to start a couple of mil back away from my line and stay as vertical as I can, and just make a first little tap. Just enough so the chisel's standing in the wood. That's it. Then I'll do the same on the other side. And now I can work my way back, removing the waste. I'll have to work backwards, so I'm sorry if this seems a bit skew width, but I just remove the waste. Again, because we're working against that bevel's pushing it forward, which is loosening the waste every time. If I tried to work the other way and stayed vertical, and I didn't already have this established trough, it would be very difficult. So now I'm halfway, I'm going to work from the other side, just because that's easier for me. Just slice those through, loosen them off a bit, sides, and then I'll just tap those out. Okay. Keep working my way down until I get about halfway, and then I'll stop and I'll work from the other side. And that way, even if I'm varying off of square with the wood ever so slightly, I can still trim one side and get a good fit. So this is the side you're going to see. So this is the side where I want to be a bit more careful, really. Slice those with some protruding grain. They're sticking up a bit. Now my knife line, that is. Oh. Don't want to hit too hard here, or you're like forcing the wood apart and you'll end up having like a splitting action, which you really do not want. So I'm still not quite in that line yet on the end. I'm still just a fraction away from it. Just to be on the safe side. I'll turn it over again. Needs a bit more of that waste out than before. Pare down this side. Pretty close now, so now I'm through, I'm just not crisp. So now I've got my chisel in that knife line. I'll bring myself up square. I'm just going to run straight down that wall. The inside, there we go. Square finish.
And then yes, yeah.
And then same the other side. And now we've done so much levering work that there was only about 1 millimetre left on either side to take out. So that's not too bad now. Same here. So go.
Oh,
Just getting rid of some of that waste. Right, so because I don't care about that, and this is a demonstration piece, as you'll see in many old woodworking books, to show that it's not the end of the piece, they'll do a squiggly line. So I'm going to cut a squiggly line with a coping saw, just so this could be the corner of the door, it could be anything. So it'll be more like a picture in a book. So I'm going to use a coping saw and make up any old line. So coping saw for going around corners. I use them mainly for removing waste. Just have this one. There. And it also means I can't hit it too hard, because if I do I'll break it, and that's pretty good. That's going to be a nice fit. I'll put it in the other side. Going to be a nice fit again. And then I'll just pare a little bit off of this side. So I'm pretty happy with that now. I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to put a bit of glue on. So a lot of people do it in different ways. Some people put it in the hole, some people put it on the tanning. I'm going to put it on the tanning because it's easier to see. I'm not going to put tons on, even though I do like to do that. It's foolproof then. This off this edge, rubber hammer. Right, put it in there. There we go. So all I'm going to do is take a smoothing plane and plane it off. I think for what that's worth, that's not too bad. That could be better. I've got a bit of a gap there, but if I was using a mortise chisel I wouldn't have that deflection, so that's not too bad, I don't think. So that's a basic mortise and tenon joint, very basic, hasn't got any side shoulders or anything like that, mid frame, you know, wouldn't be any good on a corner. But that's it, very basic. The glue's dried now, so I just sanded the sides off a little bit, and that's it. Not perfect, but
that'll do.
that'll do.
Yeah.
So the only other joints that, not the only other joints, but the other joints that be covering in the videos, more mortise and tenon joints, just different types, better ways of putting it together. If you were going to do a joint on a corner, you'd want a haunched mortise and tenon joint across your tenon to be able to break out of the corner, you know, it'd be like that. But you have a shoulder on the inside as well, so you have no gap there. It means you haven't got to be so careful with that edge when you're pulling your material out with the chisel, because it's going to get covered up. But that's just a nice joint. You normally see that on a door, maybe with a deeper, if it was on a door it'd probably have a slightly deeper haunch on it so that you've got something to trim off when you're fitting the door, but we'll do a video on how to cut those, and maybe try it in a bit of hardwood, because we've not done any hardwood in the videos yet. That's the same style of joint as this one, exactly the same sort of thing, except it doesn't go all the way through. It's a stopped tenon. So that would be very good as a centre rail on a door. If you had that at the top of the door, and you had a panel in the middle, and this would be halfway down, you don't want to see the tenon in the middle. It makes it easier to plane the door to fit the door frame. And then a good way of keeping that very strong, if you're not a big fan of glue, which a lot of woodworkers that work by hand are, a big fan of not using glue, then you drill offset holes, one hole in the rail, sorry, in the stile, and then one in the rail, and then you drill the hole in the tenon offset, and then when you knock the peg in it pulls everything in nice and tight, and that's like, you know, like it grew there, you know, it's that good there, very nice and flush, you know. So that's another joint that we're going to cover. Yeah, Then we get into more complicated joints a bit further down the line, like this is an impossible dovetail joint, supposedly. It's dovetailed this way, so it could only go in from the front, and it's dovetailed the other way, so it can't go in from the front. It could only have gone in straight down, but it can't because this is in the way. So that'll be, I'll explain how that works in another video. It's very clever the way that works. Most commonly used on a Roubo style workbench. Something else we'll have to go into in another video. But yeah, so thanks very much for watching, and subscribe if you can, because you know it does help. That's not really why I'm doing it. And
give us a like. Like us on
like.
Facebook and Twitter and all the things we haven't set up.
It's good fun doing the videos. You don't, obviously, if you're doing this all the time, you don't spend just time sat in your workshop cutting joints for no reason. So it is quite good fun. So yeah, I hope it helps if you're into woodwork or getting into it. That's the point. So thanks very much.